both departments within LEAD and of course the state. We'll also work very closely with the ethnic councils. That's why I'm here today, and we will work collaboratively to advise on policies that affect immigrant and refugee communities in Minnesota. And these are some of the barriers that we're looking at. Language access, for example, a credential for those who are bringing in this skill but cannot practice or use it here to get meaningful employment to support their families. And as the numbers show, we have had low unemployment rate. There's a labor shortage in across the country, but in Minnesota, we're one of the states that have lower unemployment rates. And that means we have so many opportunities, so many jobs out there that we are not backfilling. Then when you look at the data from the disintegrated data based on ethnicity and of course on migration status, that number goes up. The unemployment rate goes up to 7%, and then you all know that there's that disparity, and that's what we are collectively trying to address to make sure that the barriers that are there that is making some of the folks in Minnesota not get the same jobs that are that their colleagues are getting. Then we find those barriers and then we address them, and we can work collaboratively across agencies and ethnic councils to address those shortages. That's what the office will do. We will assume more coordinating between the agencies. We'll work closely with municipalities. Minneapolis and St. Paul have offices of the Americans. We'll also work closely with community partners that have been working with D and DHS and all other state agencies to see how many of those programs can support or can provide support to those targeted communities that are facing the barriers. What have we done so far? We have had a couple of successes working with community organizations and employers and doing a lot of outreach and making sure that we help job seekers connect with employers. So we have done job fairs. We have done presentations with some of the employers that have hosted us in their space, and we have also hosted some of the forums online and 2 in-person events, one in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the other one was in St. Cloud just recently. And these are all to talk with folks and see where do we need to make the best impact. What do we need to tackle first? How can we be strategic about doing this enormous task that cannot be done in just a month or 2? And so as we think of those strategies, that's where we will heavily rely on your voice and everyone else's from the community that's a stakeholder in helping elevate those barriers from across the communities in Minnesota. Of course, there are some of the specific barriers to the immigrant communities. For example, employment authorization documentation, some of the legal services that these folks need in order to work, to be able to work or extend. We've had new Minnesotans that have settled in Minnesota, the Ukrainian community under the U4U, and then also the Operation Allies with the Afghan community as well. They're working closely with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. They have some funding as well to address those employment shortages and connecting folks with employment resources. So we'll seek your your advice. We'll seek your input as we develop strategies to make the most impact and address those barriers that our immigrant and refugee communities face in Minnesota. I also want to say some of the things that we're looking forward to do is go out and meet a lot of the folks in Minnesota and in rural areas. We have seen that the demand is different in the Twin Cities than in some other places in Minnesota. We have seen, for example, folks in Minnesota, for them to get jobs, we're looking at transportation, we're looking at on-site ESL classes. We're looking at some of those initiatives to help retain those who are already employed, and of course doing job fairs and working with our career force centers across the state to open doors for people to come in and seek those job seeker services. We are having navigators placed in some of the career force centers. They have already have the opportunity to hire from the immigrant communities. There's someone who's doing Afghan license employment services at the Minneapolis Lake Street career force. There are some other folks that are doing that are speaking multiple languages. And as a Office of New Americans, within the what we are working towards is to get a language access policy that will not only advise us on which languages to translate and interpret information to, but also what other added services can we do? What can we incentivize those who are already working for D to use their multiple language skills, and how can they be reimbursed well for the services that they do across career for centers. We're also looking at strategies where we can be more having documents more accessible for folks to get those resources out there. Finally, we're also working with community organizations and making sure the word goes out there for resources. So we have the targeted community RFP grant that we hope to release soon that will help and address those disparities in the workforce between the communities. So that's what we're doing internally, and we hope to work with our stakeholders to get the outreach, to get the word out there, and also collect ideas that we can be more open to address these shortages, not just the Office of New Americans, but we want to make sure we come up with a holistic approach that includes voices from across our stakeholders. So that's what we have done so far. That's what we're about to do. Other than the language access, we have advocacy that we're doing in terms of employment authorizations, in terms of credential work, and then of course legal services, some of the other services that we hope to work with our DHS partners to get it out to the nonprofit law firms as well. I'll probably stop there and yield for questions, and then I can continue my talk, and let me know if there's any.
Yep, someone needs to turn the microphone off. I turned it off, so I don't know whose microphone that was, but, oh. Do you have questions, or, sorry?
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'll open.
We can't hear you.
Okay.
Chair Doe, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me
We
now?
can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
You're muted.
All right, just
Hang on 1 second here.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Great.
But
Great.
you're frozen.
Oh,
I'm frozen.
Okay, well, that's,
That's okay.
That's okay.
I can give you my thing. You can have mine.
Yeah. Let me get out of here.
It's okay, we can hear you, so it doesn't matter if you're frozen.
All right. Great.
So
what questions do we have here?
Council
Council members, any questions? Comments? Thoughts?
Commissioner, thank you
Yes,
so much.
Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question. This is Councilmember Crawford. Wanted to know, what are the pushes made toward home ownership for our newer families? And of course, the challenge between assimilation and keeping your culture intact.
Those are great questions. we have worked with also some of the stakeholders that have been advocating for housing, and is the Minnesota Housing Finance Authority, which is a state agency, has done some legislative work. This past legislation, there was the rental reimbursement, then there's also the down payment assistance, and then there's the faith-based mortgage financing that is also, I think, passed last session. That those are all were designed to address some of the strategies for homeownership when it comes to family for new Minnesotans. We'll mostly work closely with the folks at the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency uh, to address these challenges. What we will do, and this is where the interagency council comes, where Linda, I think, sits on the interagency council as well. We can collectively push for more policies and more advocacy to help some of the newer families gain home ownership. As for the assimilation versus integration, we have had so many regarding that. What I could say to that is it's up to the families to make sure that they are well versed or well uh, about their culture. There are, of course, some cultural and programs through some of the state agencies. I know us, maybe even the council has some of those cultural work. It's mostly done by the nonprofits, and I wouldn't assume a state agency that is doing some cultural work. I have not seen anyone who's from with a DHS or BEAD. We're mostly focused on some of those core programs. So if it's education, for example, Department of Education will only be focused on the conventional education. There are some after-school programs, but mostly it's on the core services and the core mission of agencies. As for the nonprofits, that's where I cannot comment on because they have a lot of programs to help preserve the communities and their culture. What we are supposed to do here is to be more welcoming as a state to make sure there are no barriers for people to freely exercise their culture and continue to attend the schools, for example, while also preserving your culture, or continue to work at a workplace where your culture is not seen as something that is against the employment culture there. So those are the kind of structures we have. Our DLI, Department of Labor and Industry, they have a lot of ways where someone, if they're a worker and they don't have those they cannot freely practice their religion or culture at an employment. There are avenues that they can always seek to complain. Of course, the Office of the Attorney General is there as well to support anyone who's facing discrimination against their culture or religion or gender or any. So those are the structures that are set in place. But as for the specific programs to help preserve the culture, mostly will something that the nonprofits do a lot. I don't know if someone else will add something to it.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Great. Any other questions?
Comments?
Comments?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner, for being here. I wanted to ask you to speak. You mentioned the interagency or the interagency committee, and pardon if I missed if you had already discussed this previously in the talk. But can you speak more to that? Because I know that our council and other ethnic councils are members of that committee or members of an advisory committee for ONA. And I think that would be really useful for our council, our board members to understand the function of that unit. And then the other question I had is really just to get your comments on engagements with African immigrant community organizations and African heritage community organizations broadly. I mean, in terms of new immigrants. We as a council, we've been really trying to engage with African immigrant groups, but then also Afro-Caribbean and even like Afro-Latin immigrant constituents. So I know that you're an incredible resource for that through that office and your direct links to those communities. It would be really like for you to speak to some of that.
Thank you. Those are two important aspects of the work that we will do. To start with the interagency council or the advisory group, that's more like the same. This is by statute, something that we made sure that no matter who occupies this office, is something that is codified into law, that we have to work closely with the other agencies and the ethnic councils and be part of the advisory group. So that's one. Two, the duties of the advisory group is well specified in the bill. But to touch on a few, to advise the governor on the policies that are impacting immigrant and refugee communities, of course, addressing the barriers and to just kind of collaborate through the state enterprise, some of the work that every agency does. So if you will think of it, kind of what the Interagency Council on Homelessness, for example, that kind of interagency council is what we're hoping to get. Now I know that I'm the only one now in the office who will hire someone, and we will start that process of making sure that we convene the first the Interagency Council or the advisory group sooner rather than later. And the reason why we have not done so far is because we have to have some sort of the mission and the vision that we need to get out of the council before we reach out. And we have some groundwork that we want to do, set the agenda and all that, so that we can convene everyone and sort of get your input on how to steer this office in.
Good. Get that. All right.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Any other comments, questions? I know we have a commissioner here until a certain time, so we can get those questions. Let me just kind of piggyback on what Theo said. Sorry.
Ash, you have to go on mute. Okay, that should be good now.
All right. Can you hear me? Sorry, I got to ask that question. Okay. So the question is about, we know new Americans come from all over. And so in terms of your office.
We can't hear you, my friend.
Can you hear me? All right.
I don't know actually how to do that. What makes this sound?
I don't have anything on here.
I think it's. Who has the mic? What is the microphone?
My computer is off.
Is what? Is it connected to that thing? If it's connected to that, I think you just have to press that button. And someone needs to come in and read it.
Okay. Let me sit here just to
Yeah,
make
I'll do
sure.
that, yeah.
Can you all still hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sorry, I was outside and I lost connection.
They can hear us now.
Hello?
Yeah, he can.
Yes, we're here.
I joined back. I was outside and so I lost connection suddenly. I was in the middle of answering the interagency council and what it will do for the benefit of for the board. We are thrilled to have the councils the ethnic councils as part of the interagency advisory group. And honestly, we couldn't do without the ethnic councils this work. And they're the fabric of the working with the community and have done so many years before this office was established. So that's one key element in the board. As far as when we will convene, the first one, we're hoping for this November, after we set the agenda and we have a course for this office and hire the one post that we need to hire to help this convene the group. That's that. As far as the question on the outreach we have done with the members of the African heritage, the newer immigrants, Afro-Latino, all that. I heavily rely on our Office of Public Engagement so far. Someone who's also new has started with DEED, and we've been doing a lot of work reaching out to community partners, community organizations, both in the workforce and also when it comes to business financing, like ADC and NDC and those folks, as well as Latino Economic Development Council, because some of the folks that are Afro-Latino, they will of course be part of this CMAH and of course also an MCLA as well. I don't know the intersection between those, but I will work closely with the ethnic councils to help navigate reaching out to those communities. So far, our engagement has been just through outreach and deed grants that are coming out. So we have hosted one roundtable in Brooklyn Center. I think Jude was there, who's joined us. Myself and Deputy Commissioner Mark Majors were there. We convened some of the community organizations that are doing a lot of the work for the immigrants and African immigrant communities. And mostly it was to highlight what are the opportunities to work with DEED, because we thought that we can do as many outreach as we can, but we have to talk money at some point and support the community organizations, and that's why we thought it was meaningful to come up and say these are the opportunities that are on the pipeline. Look out, and we will be happy to partner with any organization that is eligible to apply for those funds. So that's what we have done so far. But in the future, I hope to work closely with the ethnic councils on engaging with the community members throughout the state.
Thank you so much. That kind of incorporated the question I have myself. Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Chair, we're not hearing you.
Jude, okay. Council member Nadi?
No.
You cannot hear me? Council member Nadi? All right, can you get me now?
Can we disconnect from the microphone?
All right, so let's see.
I have no idea how to. I think we should disconnect from the microphone and use it.
Which one?
I don't know how to, but and then just use the computer because it keeps going out. But I'm not sure how to do that. If you turn it, I don't know.
You would have
if
to
it's
put
turn-
yours on.
I'll turn mine off once that's off, though.
Okay, let me try to put it up here. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, it's off.
Can you hear us? I don't know.
Yeah, but it was echoing.
Is it better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I muted it. Somebody else is on.
Wayne, are you still on?
No.
No, it's just. No, this one is on mute.
Okay.
Well, I turned my microphone off, so I don't know.
Put it back on. Let's see.
It doesn't
Let
echo.
me put this on.
I think it's probably from there's another microphone somewhere here.
Now yours.
All right, now.
Okay, is it much better? Can you hear me? No?
No, we're not hearing you.
All right, so we're losing our communication here. Okay, all right. How about now? How about now?
You're not gonna hear anything. Can you hear us? Someone has a.
Yeah, we can hear with little echo, but go ahead. Let's see if it's manageable.
No, that's weird.
This is
Is the louder that loud there?
It's on mute.
just cut it off.
Okay.
How about now? Oh, sorry.
No, we're still on. What camera? What's the picture doing?
Yeah, we're still getting a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we're not using it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you all hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
good now.
Okay.
So in this room, we have to do one at a time. So if you'll go first, and then you'll have to go on mute for everybody else to go on. Otherwise, we'll hear the echo.
Okay.
So everybody in this room should be on mute.
Yeah.
Oh no, not you. I just heard it before. So Ash.
Is that your phone?
Oh, okay. Can you your volume on that too? Yeah.
Okay, I think
Yeah, we can hear you.
you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jude, did you have a question quickly or not?
Yeah, I think we'll just move on. I think some time has passed.
No, it's not. That's why. I swear this is like. Okay. You have to ask the question again.
Can you say something? Somebody?
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay,
Now we can hear you now. All right.
okay.
Right. Did you have a question for Commissioner Mohamed?
Does he still have some time without his?
Yes, he still has. We got about 10 minutes to go.
Yes.
He does.
Okay, all right, I can go ahead. Yeah, so thank you, Assistant Commissioner Mohamed, for the work you guys do. I know it was very challenging at the very beginning of the Office of New America in terms of funding, but I'm glad that after much effort, we're able to secure some reasonable funding for the office. So one thing that is reoccurring is the ability of the constituents of Office of New America to participate in contracts with the state. It's very difficult for Black community as a whole to do business with the state because of all the requirements and all the challenges. So is there anything, I know you guys are making some effort, but direct focus on helping especially immigrants and refugees to be able to do business with the state? So how they can develop those skill sets, especially with all the opportunities we have in the state in the next 2 years.
Great question, Jordan, and you have the you discussed the same issues that we constantly get in terms of working with the state. We all have these resources that we push out every year, and the number of immigrant-owned organizations that are working with the state does increase a bit every now and then, but we always receive that feedback that we need to be um, more open to working with organizations that are led by the immigrant communities. As far as what we are doing about that, there were a couple of discussions, and I'm sure you've also been part of those discussions. And Mark, for example, has also been. Um, what are the issues that come in that is making some of the organizations not work with the state, and it can be mostly on from the state side or from the nonprofit side. Now the requirements are there. There are some that have been there forever that are systemically designed to not give the opportunity to smaller nonprofits. There are some that are there to make sure the state has an oversight of the fundings that come out, we need to look at it from a bigger picture of how can we support and work closely with community organizations that are making the impact while also doing the oversight function that deed has, that we have to report back to the legislator. um, there are two things that happened so far. There's a lot of direct appropriations that have already gone to the nonprofits, to the community organizations, that are making it easy for us to just manage the fund and not decide who gets what. But on the other hand, there are some of the organizations that have worked with the state for so long that it makes it tough for a newer organization or an organization that find a new immigrant to come in. And these are issues that not one or two or three of the agencies are facing. It's across agencies, DHS, DEED, and everyone. What can the office do? I feel like we need a bigger discussion on how can we look at those systemic procedures that are there, and how can we make sure that it does not lock out new organizations while also doing the oversight authority that's needed. It needs much bigger discussion. This is one of the issues that we need to tackle as a community, and not just rely on the Office of New Americans to do the work. I feel like we need to have a bigger discussion and then come up with action points that the office can champion and the council can. So I don't want to preempt and say that's where the impact, that's where we need to do, and that's what I'm doing. I will instead rely on your advice and us coming together to find the action points and on what we can do. Of course, we have so far done something to do with the capacity building for new organizations. So Mark talked about working with Propel nonprofits and some other programs that we want to roll out for those nonprofits that are short on funding, that cannot have a full-time grant manager. How can we help train some of the some of the staff to do this work and meet the compliance need that's required to manage those grants. So that's one little piece that we're addressing, the capacity issue, but I understand and acknowledge that that's not about it, and we need a bigger discussion on how can we increase the participation from community organizations led by the newer immigrants.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. Well, I just want to express my appreciation and thanks to Assistant Commissioner Mohamed for taking the time out to come and just have a discussion with us on the work that he's doing, his office is doing. I think that he has a whole lot of work cut off, and whatever we can do as a council, definitely we want to put ourselves in a position to support that work, particularly where it impacts people of African heritage. So I'm sure staff will continue to liaise with your office, and then we can continue to have that conversation. Any final word before you go?
Thank you so much. I really look forward to working closely with the staff. And as I said, some of these issues need a little bit more discussion. And I'm looking forward to have a constant meeting with Linda and the team and the board to make sure that we address those issues. Finally, I would love to have met everyone in person today, but it was just traveling between meetings, in-person meetings, and so on. next time I would make sure I attend in person.
Okay. Thank you so much, and have a good night. All right.
Okay.
All right. Okay, we will move along to our next agenda item, which is a presentation on the African American Family Preservation Act, something we've been working on for quite a while. So we want to get some update from Theo, who will be giving us some insight into where we are now today. Theo?
Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Oh, you're good now.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So
Good
I'll
evening.
be, yes, hey, council member. I will be using the next, few minutes here to give an update, and we can have some discussion on the African American Family Preservation Act. I don't have slides and an actual formal presentation, but I can go through some of the the takeaways from our work on the push for this legislation over the last couple of months here. First of all, and a lot of the information I'm giving right now, will package and provide and ongoing to the council members and to community. First of all, the African American Family Preservation Act is House File 912.
Do you want to turn your camera on?
Oh. House File 912.
Just so we can center you.
Okay. Thank you, Flock. I was just reminded my camera was not on. I didn't realize. 912 in the House and Senate File 716. The authors are Representative Agbaje in the House and Senator Champion. And so basically, I want to just go through a few points here. I want to talk to you all about just an overview of the bill and the kind of systemic problem it's trying to solve, and thinking about this bill as a step towards that, to addressing that in Minnesota, and then really thinking about the issues, a specific issue regarding the legality, like some legal obstacles and challenges that anyone who wants to push for this legislation has to confront and address. So our council, is part of that, and community is part of that. And then just some details about, working with partners and how we think about how we move forward. I'm sure folks here have heard about this bill, and we've been working on this bill as a council. Prior to CMAH, the Council on Black Minnesotans was, and including this particular organization that we're at right now, really big pioneers in this area of legislation in Minnesota, in terms of Black child welfare and addressing racial disparities in the child welfare system as they impact Black children and families for decades. I mean, going back to as an organization, going back to the 1980s, really, at the forefront of changes and the struggle for improvements in that area. There's a systemic problem, right? And so this is the key thing. African heritage children and families are negatively impacted by racial disparities in the Minnesota and the U.S. child welfare system. And there's some definitional work that we should do immediately, just based on the terms of this bill and the terms of just Black child welfare policy in Minnesota and in the United States. So by African heritage children and families, I'm referring to all those who self-identify as Black people or persons of African descent. That includes African Americans, American descendants of slaves or ADOS, as well as others of the African diaspora, first and second generation African, Afro-Caribbean, African, Afro-Latin immigrant communities. The data that we have from Minnesota, our own state government data shows that Black children are overrepresented at every stage of the child protection system or process. 3 times more likely to be reported to Child Protective Services or to come in contact with CPS, 3 to 5 times more likely to be placed in out-of-home care, also more likely to experience placement instability and to age, to stay, in a report that I saw from from our council in the 90s, Stephen Belton called it like the weight in children, like, they stay in the system and age out of the system. The national data that we have shows that African American families are no more likely to mistreat or maltreat their children than white families. And when you control for other types of factors like income, unemployment, etc., African American communities actually can have lower rates of such types of maltreatment. So we have an imbalance. There are no differences between the races in the likelihood that a parent will abuse or neglect a child, but there's great difference between races in the likelihood that a child will be removed from a home and placed in foster care. The principle of this bill is to really address, the sort of objective is to address that institutional imbalance, that disparity there. So the core message here is that if the purpose of child welfare is to protect the best interests of the child, and that's really the state policy in terms of at a federal, and particularly in Minnesota, that the purpose of child welfare is to protect the best interests of a child, then the argument here is that Minnesota Child Welfare Services must stop arbitrary removal of African American children from African American families. And specifically, the key word is that there should be active efforts to preserve Black families or to reunify Black families. And that must be part of the legal duty of responsible child welfare services in Minnesota. The bill, as a just overview of this bill, protecting the best interests of the African American child, promotes stability and security of African American children and families by establishing minimum standards to prevent such arbitrary or unnecessary removal, and then improve permanency outcomes, including family reunification for African American children. And the bill establishes child protection, out-of-home placement, and termination of parental rights processes that will be specific to African American children and families. Among these reforms would be that it would require that social service agencies make active efforts to prevent out-of-home placement of African American children or an African American child, eliminate the need for the child's removal from the child's home, and reunify the child with the child's family as soon as practicable, I should say. And that's section 4 of that bill. That's a key section that uses the active efforts language. Other aspects of it, it creates an African American Child Welfare Oversight Council to aid statewide compliance with the requirements of the bill. That's in section 9. It establishes an African American Child Well-Being Unit to assist counties and monitor programs to address the child welfare disparities. That provision in the bill has been taken up to some extent in terms of the establishment of such an office within DHS through administrative rule change. So this would be the key thing would be, putting this stuff in actual Minnesota law and Minnesota statute. Other key part of it is to establish African American family preservation grants for organizations and service providers, and also requires African American cultural competency training for individuals working with African American families in the child welfare system. So there are several of those, and we can discuss, so we can, if there are questions about the requirements of the bill, we can get more into that. I want to also mention, as I said, there's one of the key, issues of debate around this legislation is the legality question, specifically around consideration of race or ethnic background, heritage of children, and their placement in the placement process. So, just some high level points just on the legislative history of this type of stuff. Minnesota, it turns out, I mean, this is according to what I found with the legislators, the legislative reference library. Minnesota was actually the first state to pass state legislation that seeks to preserve the cultural and family heritage of minority children in the child welfare system. That was in 1983, and the law was called the Minority Child Heritage Protection Act, or another name for it was the Minority Child Heritage Preservation Act, 1983. That law created an order of preference for placement of minority children. So relatives were given priority, followed by adults who shared the same racial and ethnic heritage of the child. Since that time, the policy orientation has changed dramatically because of federal and state laws. At the federal level, there were two pieces of legislation in the 1990s, one called the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, another one called the Inter-Ethnic Placement Act, and they placed restrictions on using race or ethnicity in adoption and foster care placement policy. To comply with that the federal law, Minnesota removed language about ethnic and racial heritage and replaced it with language about that focused on the child's best interests. Right, so that's a key sort of index for where that language comes from. The focus in child welfare policy on protecting the child's best interests. Now, the thing for us to consider here is that for decades, the position of our council and community partners has been that to protect the child's best interests, the child welfare system must stop arbitrary removal of African American children from African American families. Like that's been I'll share there are reports from our council that are archived in the legislative reference library speaking to this issue. So we've been working on these issues since the 80s and 90s, and the present language that we have, which is a work in progress, the present language that we have and the work towards passing this particular bill is the sort of current iteration of that work. And then finally, before I just open up to discussion and questions, I would say that the key to moving this bill forward would be that different segments of Black Minnesota, of African heritage Minnesota, must work together to support the legislation. I mean, when we talk to different community stakeholders, policy stakeholders, there's a chorus, and Linda also hears the chorus that we need to come together in one voice and really move this legislation forward. And so we would need to really be connected to different segments of our community to really do this. We have been linking up with Khalees Houston at Village Arms. She has been a long-term partner in this iteration of the legislation, and really leaning on community partners like her, Village Arms, NAACP, for that community engagement and education around this bill. We also, this is opening up now for our council members to, in terms of within the networks, constituent networks of our council, I think there's some work we can do in terms of connecting with different segments of the African heritage population in greater Minnesota, as well as in the metro area.
Did you mention ICWA? Did you mention ICWA? That was based off of ICWA, right?
Yes, and as Flakami just said, why did that happen? Oh, okay. All right. You want to speak to that?
No, go ahead.
Well, Flockman just reminded me. I mean, a key aspect of the background for this bill, and really the model that much legislation like this is based on, is the ICWA bill, which is the Indian Child Welfare Act, that was passed as federal law in the 1970s, and Minnesota has the Minnesota Indian Family Preservation Act, which was put into law in the mid 80s as an extension or after that minority. What was the name of that bill? The initial, the initial bill I spoke about. But anyway, I'll open up a question for discussion. I know that Councilmember Adams Lee, we and I have discussed this, work on this legislation. Councilmember Andre Dukes has been a key supporter and a key partner in this work. So I'll open for conversation. I know I see that Councilmember Dukes has his hand up.
Can you mute?
Yes, Theo, thanks. I just wanted to add a couple of more pieces of context that, folks just need to know that the number of children in the child protection system has been the same since 1990. So all of, those legislative acts that you mentioned, really did nothing to reduce the amount of children in child protection. And also, what we know is that most of the cases are neglect and not abuse. And we know that much of that neglect is due to, families who are, living in poverty. And so poverty becomes an issue and a fixable issue if we were to change our focus just as a state. But then also just in terms of the traction of the bill itself, it got some pretty good traction in the last legislative session, although it didn't make it to the floor. But part of the issue is Senate districts. And so I think that there's a lot that we need to do within, the African and African American community, but also we need to really do some work in the Senate districts as well to build momentum and generate support. I also just wanted to ask a question just about, I know part of the issue too was the name, African American Preservation. There seemed to have been some discussion in the legislature about changing the name, and I don't know if that has continued to be a point of discussion. But I think that I don't think that we should change the name, but I just know that had been one of the barriers that I had heard was mentioned in some of the past legislative sessions. So I just wanted to add those contexts and then just ask that question as well.
Thank you so much for that, council member. Yeah, for sure. So, I check all the key points you just said regarding the issue of poverty, neglect versus abuse. That's a key, and that's a very compelling talking point, for discussion of this bill. So I really thank you for bringing that up. And then I would definitely want to, I think that we need to have more conversation about the legislative strategy, and how we address resistance, in certain districts, and how negotiations around that. In terms of the name, Linda and I have had discussions about the name of this bill, for me, I see the definition and that's why in the beginning I try to lay out that definition. I see the definition as very embracing, all inclusive, right? And it's very explicit in the bill that African American means person of African descent, and I would say that in the advocacy around the bill, at least like the in the recent, for September, for the fall season here, when I have been partnering with Khalees, for instance, the message and that she leads on is this bill is for African Americans and Africans. And I think she said that also to our council last year when she presented. And the other thing too, because I did question, this is a discussion that I had with her, and she mentioned that, in previous years, African immigrant organizations have supported the bill to some degree. And for instance, this bill it impacts all Black folks, in terms of the child protection system. And in Minnesota, we know that East Africans, in terms of the population and the demographics, it particularly impacts the Somali community. In terms of language barriers, etc., in the court systems. And my understanding is that there were Somali immigrant organizations who had signed on and were organizational signees for the bill in the past. So that's some work in any case that we have to do. The last thing I would say is that, everything is on the table in terms of really, trying to push for something that we can all come together on and make law. I think, all questions, all issues should be on the table.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were continuing? No? Okay, great. Well, I wanted to add to what you said, because this has been going on for a long time. And of course, there have been a lot of roadblocks, and that's why it hasn't passed yet. But one of the things you highlighted, I also noticed what Councilmember Duke said in terms of Senate districts and different areas to look at. But I think when you're talking about what can we do different that didn't happen before to maximize that, and it sounded like getting the African heritage community together to support it will be a big part of it to move it forward. So the question then becomes, what does that look like? What kind of strategy to do that? I know probably won't be able to answer that question right now, but I think that's a way to develop, because we have the communities. It's just to get the buy-in to support the bill. How is that going to look like? So I just want to, encourage us as we go along to kind of look into that and develop a plan around that, so that everybody is supporting this bill and moving, put the pressure where it belongs, so we're not repeating the same thing. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not repeating. Guess what? Councilmember Jude just walked in. So that's good. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
So, hi, and thank you for your patience in regards to the technology. We're been trying to work through a difficult situation, but hey, we're here. You guys can hear, we can hear you, and so progress is being made. But I just wanted to make a comment in terms of what we have started doing. So Theo has started meeting with the principal parties. So whether that is Khalees, who is, I guess, the founder of the bill. We're going to meet with Representative Agbaje, who is the author of the bill. And so we met already with DHS, Child Welfare, and we know we have Councilmember Adams Lee, who is engaged directly on a committee that speaks to child welfare. So what we're doing is meeting with individuals first, and then we plan to take on that ownership of pulling all the parts together. Because I think what I've seen is, throughout my short tenure here, is that everybody has an opinion, and they're all somewhat different. And so we see our council as being a group who is kind of separate, and we can bring the parties together to have the dialogue and come to some consensus. Because having something at the end of the day is better than having nothing. So that is our plan, and I know that Councilmember Dukes, you're highly engaged in child welfare, and whoever else wants to join us, you know, Adamsley, of course, is all the way in, but whoever else wants to join us, we would love to have your support as we figure out what is the best strategy, because a lot of it is, one, making sure that the language appeals to everyone, two, also making sure that the language is passable. Because we can, as community, can say, hey, we want this in the bill, we want that in the bill. But is that going to pass? Is it going to be a hindrance? Can we get something moved forward? So we may have to bend a little bit. And as long as we focus, what is the goal of the work that we're doing, and focus on that. And not focus on whether we wrote the bill or whether we have another bill that's different, but we need this and that. And we don't need that. We need us to come together, and I see the council as being an organization that can bring all the parties together as well as connect with the legislators. I mean, Councilmember Nadi alone is at the legislature every day. So we can get some things done. We have those relationships. So I'm excited about, so far, the progress that is being made. And Councilmember Dukes, for sure, you will be getting a phone call regarding this.
Great. Okay, any other comments, questions, or thoughts around this? Okay.
I did have, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I don't have anything else.
If you got a question, go ahead.
Well, that's okay, because it kind of flew out, it went in one ear and out the other. It was as you were speaking. Oh, I know what it was. So is there data, clear data, that supports the fact that Black children fare better with their families? I know that was a challenge for increasing teachers of color. You know, we had to make sure that we have data to support the facts to support the comments that we're making. And so if there is clear data, I think, people can argue with data, but data means...
I was going to ask, isn't there data to show that for every child in their family, right?
I don't know, but I'm asking.
Oh.
I'm asking the question. Yeah, I'm asking the question because I haven't studied this space.
Okay, yeah, that's okay.
There's a research, do I need to turn on this thing? Or
no, I'll turn it off. I'll turn this off.
Like I
You can go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if they can hear. No, that's me.
Generally, to Linda's question, there's definitely a large body of research on Flockamy's point that, whether you're Black, white, or, whichever ethnic, if you staying within your home or within your family network, there are better prospects and support structures. But for sure, I think that there's a lot of research, and we can go look into it. But I think there's a lot of research to back the point that in terms of ethnic or cultural or racial heritage, being part of those kin networks, you fare better, like children fare better. Yeah. A psychological issue. The psychological research, you know what I'm saying? Like all kinds,
I have a lot of
and race.
I'll ask you offline, because I know a lot of social workers say that too, who work in child protection. But then my question was, can't they just, is the problem that they don't want to change their language? Because I remember someone was saying that they wanted to change it for everybody.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Part of the thing is Councilmember Dukes' point, right? So for instance, there's a report that I landed on that our council did, like in the 90s, right? And part of the dilemma is that they were saying they were going to stop considering race, but then kids were being the reason for stopping, the justification was that it's to try to get the kid placed as soon as possible, right? So whichever the race of the parent, but then the fact is still black kids end up staying in the system and just waiting out longer. And so part of the recommendation that the council put out then related to that is that the state needs to do a better job recruiting black foster parents, and I think Councilmember Adams Lee, raised this issue in the conversation I had with her, that in terms of just building those support structures, recruiting parents, recruiting service providers within our community, like building those resources within our community, has to be part of the policy
And
plan.
there's some stuff with the county too that I can, but
Yeah, we're gonna move
Thank you all.
on. Okay.
turn the volume on for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Theo, for that presentation. It means that we do have a lot of work to do. One of the things that I would like to see us actually accomplish too is that over a period of time, maybe do some timeline and look at what kind of progress we're making with the different strategies that we employ. So that'll be something that at least we can get periodically to see how we're moving the needle to that. But thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And I would just read council member, because everybody didn't have the opportunity to see this. Council member Crawford said, let me just make sure I can read that here. We should be giving young parents options to help rather than removing children. And he also said, let's see here, we have to find the families and the stories that are impacted by this horrible government sanctioned action that is taking our kids away. Right. Yep. Okay. And Councilmember Dukes is right. Safe Passages has also been an organization opposed to the bill. They have just changed leadership, and I'm wondering if there might be a new opportunity to gain support with them. So we can look at all of that as well.
Which group is that?
Safe Passages.
Safe Passages.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. We just, I'd say we just got Councilmember Jude joining us at the table here, so that's nice. We're moving along very fine. We have our last agenda item is the strategic planning session debrief. This part of our, our meeting, I'm excited about it because we've been talking over some time, brainstorming and putting out some things that we believe we could accomplish. Our last meeting was very, very fruitful with all the suggestions and comments about how individually we can see ourselves in terms of as council members, whether we are a governing board or a working board, we call it, however way that we describe that. But I think it boils down to the fact that we've gone through a period of strategic meetings, we've developed a strategic plan. Now, I think we are at the junction where is how we're going to implement this. So I just want to highlight that here at this time and just look at two things. One is that we did agree that we will continue the priority areas that we have. Remember, we got 5 priority areas with the staff, and we'll talk more about what the staff role is going to do in terms of bringing this to us. But we look at the enhance the relationship between African Americans and African immigrant communities. The second one was bridge the gap in terms of the legislative funding that was already allocated and show that the money is being used in ways that can benefit the black community. This could involve the council only or partnering with other organizations. Also, develop structure processes for how the council tackles issues. So anything from healthcare, children, welfare, all of that, public safety, we should be able to have a good structured position. So when we think about this, and I just want to hear your thoughts, let's just go around. I'm excited. Linda, of course, the team will get together to kind of put together some suggestions or ways that we can get this implemented. And then we, as a board, we can look at that and start getting our feet on the ground one way or the other, whether it's even in a passive way, contributing to to the objectives and making sure that we can achieve those objectives. So with that being said, any thoughts around our strategic plan? We are going to forward this information to you definitely, so you can take a look at it. All the suggestions that were made, also all of the strategies that we kind of put forward. We can also look at that. But I think we will leave it up now at this point to what the staff can actually put together and present to us to be a part of. Any comments on that? I didn't intend for us to go too much into this, just bringing it to the light that we have done all the talking, right? Over a period of time. I think we are at the point now, hey, let's make sure we get these things done, and how we're going to do will be very important. We already got some really good ideas in place, and I'm sure we'll be able to work on that. Linda, you want to touch on any of that? Or any question, any comments from anybody? It would be highly appreciated.
Chair, I'm excited about the opportunities, and as we look at the goals, to just make sure we have some benchmarks or measurables in there, so we know when we started, what we started, and maybe when we finish, what success looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment that the staff is ready and committed. We have our marching orders, and so we will be putting some information together to share with you, probably even as soon as the November meeting, as to how we think that we should be moving to actually execute on these goals. And I just want to remind everyone that it's the staff and it's the council members. We've been working really well with everyone, and there's a lot of expertise on the board, and we plan to really tap into it. So as I said earlier, Councilmember Dukes will be getting a phone call. You know, we've already tapped into Councilmember Adams-Lee. And so that's where we need to be with the council. It needs to be staff and board members and community connecting to try to drive legislation for our people. So I'm excited about moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? It's rare for you not to speak. So, all right. Sounds like a plan. I think we'll leave it up to the staff to come back, and then we can start from there and start doing some of the things. In the meantime, of course, every one of you, as I stated before, you know, you were valuable to this council, your engagement within your community as you go about your daily tasks and work. Some of you are, you know, very, very much engaged, and we like to hear those stories too, so it can be part of our story, because you are part of this group. Therefore, your story must be part of our story as well. The other thing to kind of talk about is that part of this plan is our rebranding and our marketing strategy. That's also part of this. So we're looking at a big picture. You know, how we perceive ourselves, how the community perceive us, and how we're gonna engage with one another. I'm very excited about that and that relationship. The council, the executive council, talked about some strategy that I will share with the staff, also to see how we can get some of those things incorporated, and then we can have that discussion in our next meeting in November. Sounds good? Any comments, questions, thoughts? All right. Well, I think we did very well with time here, so I'll let you all have some time back and go and have the rest of the evening. Any announcements? I know I'm going to jump in there, right?
Right. I look.
Any announcement? Do we have an announcement?
I have an announcement.
No, we don't have an announcement. We don't have any announcement.
Oh, you have an announcement?
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I have an announcement. After some careful consideration, I have submitted my resignation on Monday for my position. So my last day will be on the 20, I can't remember, sometime in October. But it's been a really great time here at CMAH as Communications and Community Engagement Director. I'm still going to be doing some of the same work just with the city of Minneapolis. And I just want to thank everybody, all the staff, my coworkers, Linda, Wayne, Jude, who's been a superstar and just a really great advisor to me, actually. So I'm just really grateful to work for. I remember actually one of the questions that I was asked during my interview is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, I see myself working for Black people. And I truly, truly believe that that's just actually what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I was really great to do that. And I know that I'll continue to work and collaborate with people here. I'm definitely someone who is, I always say that organizing is not a job, it's a lifestyle. So you can't ever leave it. So yeah, I think that's my announcement.
All right, good,
Yeah.
good. Well, yeah. Any thoughts here? Of course, it'd be sad to see you go, but at the same time, we know that you're following a path that you really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So we wish you all the best in your next endeavor. Okay? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, likewise, it has been a pleasure working with you, Florkami, and I mean, you have just done such a fabulous job. I think of you as the glue, like you've been the glue in so many ways. So thank you for your service and congratulations on your next step. So
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. You all go out and have the rest of your evening. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you
Yeah,
so
flocking me.
much.
Best of luck to you. Bye bye, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for being
Bye. Yeah,
here.
thanks, Michelle,
All right.
and everyone else.
Everyone else,
I
of
still have
course.
to connect him to my brother.
All right.
Wow, Jude, where
And
were you?
Beth,
In the community, huh?
thanks for coming, and I'm sorry
And-
that, there was a lot going on here. Normally, it flows like clockwork.
I know, this is our first, I was
The
like, what's going on?
technology, yeah.
Somebody is.
We were challenged, but we made it through. So I'm hoping though that you will come back. We'll have our next meeting will be virtual.